Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. In February 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm about 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia. I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've lost about 100 pounds. I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in ketosis.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give any medical advice. But we are keen to share our own experiences. We're both actually software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
No, sir.
We have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them. We hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite research supporting any claims that we make.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies.
Yep.
We love to cook and we love to eat. In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot and will not be ignored.
Not this week, it can't.
I dare ya. Unless you're fasting, then you can ignore it. So, let's start podcast number 108, Stories from Breckenridge.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
That's low-carb Breckenridge.
Yeah. So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Yes, we actually do have a correction, and that is from Daniel on the Ketogenic Forum, and this is a correction to episode 106 with Eric Westman.
Okay.
And Daniel says, "Hi, Richard. This is just a small correction to the episode featuring Dr. Eric Westman. I just want to point out the correct use of nomenclature. By definition, all chaps are assless."
Really? That's the errata for this week? Really? Oh. I'm sorry. I suppose they are.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if that's all we got wrong, we're doing pretty good. So let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is. A ketogenic diet is any diet that puts you in a state of ketosis, which you get by burning fat for fuel, and produces ketones as a byproduct. Those ketones can be used to fuel lots of cells, including your brain. Your brain loves ketones. Your heart loves ketones.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd get there by reducing our carbohydrate intake to 20 grams or less per day.
Yep.
Protein is moderate. Scales with your lean body mass, 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per day per every kilogram of lean body mass. And then all of our energy we get from fat. Fat.
Yeah, fat on your plate or fat on your belly. That Krispy Kreme that you stacked away for a rainy day a couple of decades ago.
That's right. That's why body fat is there, to be burned for fuel.
Yep.
When there's no food. So, how was your week, man?
Yeah, I'm just switching gears from low-carb Breckenridge to Keto Fest.
That's right.
In low-carb Breckenridge, we had conferences run by Dr. Jeff Gerber and Dr. Rod Taylor.
Yep.
We rented out a massive mansion. It was like something out of The Shining, you know. And we had I think it was 8 rooms or 10 bedrooms and a dozen of us all staying there. And we cooked up a storm. It was
yes, we did.
Off the hook.
It was amazing.
It was. And we had a great time, but time moves on. We have to get on to our next thing, which is Keto Fest. So we've started our Kickstarter for Keto Fest, and VIP tickets are flying out the door. So if you want to come to Keto Fest and you want to go to the VIP party and you want an all-access pass, there's very few of those left.
Yep, there's only one way to get it.
Yeah, and you only can get that through the Kickstarter.
And our Kickstarter has been really taking off. I mean, a lot better than last year. I think we're like 42% funded in 10 days.
Yeah, we're a known concern. A lot of people came back from Keto Fest raving about what a good time they had. So it's a lot less risk now that people know that we can put on a party and that we're good at it, and everyone had a good time. We did actually post a picture of the admins at the after party from Keto Fest 2017.
Right.
Both on Facebook and on Twitter. And one charming fella suggests on Twitter that these people who did Keto Fest all look fat. And I would suggest, who actually wants to party with thin people? Seriously, like they know how to have fun. So, anyway, screw you, anonymous dude.
Okay.
So, how was your week, Carl?
Oh, well, man, I had just a great week. Obviously, coming back from Breckenridge, trying to, it's nice to be at sea level again.
Oh, I can breathe.
Yeah, we can breathe, and it's wonderful. But we had a great time, and I really did enjoy it. After Breckenridge, I went to a conference that Microsoft puts on every year for their MVPs.
Right.
It's the MVP Summit. And I was barraged by people coming up to me, telling me that I saved their life.
Wow. By coding in VB for them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it wasn't that. It was obviously the keto thing.
That's outstanding.
It was just amazing. And the only difference between, me and anybody else on the internet for these people is they know me from, my podcast, and they trust me.
That helps.
I think that's it. I mean, it's just, that's what led them to try the ketogenic thing. And people are reversing diabetes and losing weight. And, have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? And like just a dozen or more people had come up to me and said that. So that was really rewarding.
That's very humbling, isn't it?
It's very humbling. Yeah. I spent the afternoon yesterday down at RD86, and this is the Spark Makerspace, the old Spark Makerspace for where the kitchen was at Keto Fest last year.
Yeah.
And Chef Robert Ramsey, has turned this entire thing into a production kitchen and restaurant environment.
Nice. Because last year it had multiple purposes. It was like a wood shop, and it was like an electronic shop, and it was a drop-in center. Now it's all restaurant all of the time.
That's right. And the wood shop in the back that nobody really had access to is a production kitchen with 4 or 5 different stations, 2 big convection ovens, freezers, refrigerators, and he's using for burners. He's not using ranges. He's using induction burners.
Right.
And these, I guess, only get hot when they come in contact with metal.
Yeah, you have to have a ferrous pot
on
them, or fry pan,
Yeah. So I went down there yesterday to talk Keto Fest and other things, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And he had made sous vide beef short ribs.
Ooh.
With a mirepoix, and it was so good.
Yeah, I actually had beef short ribs tonight. Interestingly enough, using a pressure cooker, but sous vide beef short ribs, nice.
So the other thing we talked about is doing a mini Keto Fest, just a one-day thing, once a month.
Oh, nice.
And all it would be you come down, we'll do some cooking demos, we'll eat some food, and we'll watch video presentations by some of the rock stars that we've interviewed on our show in the keto community. And then we will have live Q&A with those experts.
Nice. Do you have enough locals that have gone keto for such an event?
Yeah, I started a New London County ketogenic meetup group.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it's got almost 300 people in it.
Sweet.
So that's what we're going to do. And so it's going to be like a whole day of stuff that you would do at Keto Fest.
Nice.
And I got the first date. And guess who's going to be in town April 7th?
That's me.
That's you.
I'll be in town. Yeah, I will.
Saturday, April 7th is our first date.
Nice.
To do these mini things. We're going to try to do them once a month.
That's my mid-semester break. So that all works out quite neatly.
How cool is that?
That's very cool.
All right.
And this time, when I travel to the States, I'm going to try not to leave my laptop in Denver Airport, which I did this time round. I know, right?
Dope.
Yeah. Well, they're shipping it to me by FedEx, so, well,
Yeah, you can blame it on the altitude, I think.
Yeah.
It really messed me up. No. Well, I feel like giving away a mug. Do you?
Yep, loot time.
Loot time. So every show we give away stuff to a random member of the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. And you can join the fan club by going to fanclub.2keto.com and you just answer a few questions. And we pick somebody random. So today's winner is Anita Pritchard.
Congratulations, Anita.
Yes.
You're our rando of the day.
That's right. Must be a lucky day for you.
And if you don't want to wait to win a mug, you can always buy one at gear.2keto.com and pick yourself up a t-shirt while you're at it. I'm not saying arseless chaps again.
All right. Lynn, that brings us to... Mail. All right, I'll start.
Go for it.
This one was a private message from somebody in the forum. I won't disclose the name.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Nah.
But here it is. There's an interesting thread I've been participating in since I joined the forums recently. A lot of us adults have fixed our messed up metabolisms and whatnot, but what about our kids?
Right.
I have an obese son who's 12.
Ooh,
wow.
That's early.
And would like to get him on track somehow without making him feel like I'm depriving him of simple things like birthday parties, holidays, the times where we all celebrate with sugar and carbs. In a perfect world, my 12-year-old would have the logic and reasoning skills to say, these carbs are killing me, but we all know how imperfect our world is.
Yeah.
Maybe you could get some experts to chime in on such a topic on the podcast. I don't know the solution to my son's problem yet, but man, I am certainly trying to deal with the problem without him hating me for the rest of my life. Anyway, it's just an idea I'm throwing out there because it's relevant to my interests and maybe a lot of parents out there. It's a carby world we're stuck in, and kids pose a unique problem to parents when they start packing on the pounds. Thanks for listening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's especially difficult because your son probably shares your DNA and has the same metabolic flaws that you do, and you have the same diet. That's the other thing, is we not only share DNA with our children, we eat the same food, so we share the same diet, the same environment. Yeah. And so, it means that for our kids, they get a head start in this whole metabolic roller coaster. And in some cases, kids get it in the womb. They're already being adapted to a large amount of glucose and having to create a lot of insulin for it. So it's extremely unfortunate. But I don't have any good advice for you because I'm not a parent. But
well, I do. I don't know if it's good advice, but it's advice anyway. I think that in order for kids to really get it, they have to experience it. Kids like to think about the future instead of focusing on the now, right?
Right.
And as we all know, when you're starting keto and you think about the future, it's almost like you're losing things. It's like a loss. Right. I can't have cake. I can't have ice cream. It's what I can't have. And so with a kid, just say, look, we're going to do this for 3 days. We're gonna eat like this for just 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, you can go back and have all the sugar and crap and everything else that you want. But for 3 days, we're just going to do that. So it's not like forever. But what happens is, if they can do this in 3 days, they'll feel better and say, okay, you might have dropped a few pounds, but you feel great, right? Let's focus on that feeling. And do you want to continue to feel great? Okay, let's go another day.
That's a good way of doing it. Yeah.
And then just negotiate. Is today the day that we go off it? Okay. Let's make a note of how we feel. And when we go off it, how that feels.
Yeah.
And was it worth it?
Yeah, that's actually sneaky because water weight in the first 3 days.
Yeah.
They're going to drop like 2 or 3 kilos in the first 3 days. They're going to feel great.
Yeah, they're going to feel amazing.
As soon as they go off, it all comes back again. Right. It's like that signing bonus. So that's quite sneaky, yeah.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Sneaky, but, that's the way to do it. Now they're only thinking 3 days ahead, not for the rest of my life. Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah. Oh, well, thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. What do you got?
So I've got one from Mark, and Mark is also on our forum, and this one is entitled Carrying the Message, and he says, it's been suggested by Carl and Richard that we should attempt to bring our message of health to at least 2 others. For me, my software engineer and my general manager and their spouses have both started keto as of this week.
Wow.
In the manufacturing facility where I work in America's Midwest in Wisconsin, that is now a total of 5, not including their spouses, people of less than 100 doing keto. Thanks everyone for helping me to change the world. And this is a great thread. There's a lot of people leaning in to the entire process. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to get the grassroots of people who are suffering metabolic syndrome to give it a go and just try it out. And if it fixes them, or at least helps to halt the progression of their disease, for them to take responsibility for 2 other people. And if everybody does that, it's a geometric progression that will take over the world.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Richard, before we get started, we have a very special guest on the line for the next 5 minutes. It's Daisy Brackenhall from Keto Woman Podcast. Hi, Daisy.
Hiya, how are you doing?
Great to talk to you. We just did a recording with you for your show, and we thought we haven't really talked all that much about Keto Woman on this show, so we thought we'd give you a little time to tell us about your podcast.
Tell you about my extraordinary women and the odd man. And you 2 have just added to that. You've been my second and third.
We've been called worse than odd. Yeah, tell us about it.
I mean, I knew I would, but I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's the perfect excuse to talk to people and ask them whatever I want to ask them, really. But one of the common things that I get when I'm talking before the show to the guest is that they say, I just don't think my story is going to be interesting. It's, I've listened to your show and I've heard all these really cool and interesting stories that people have got to say. And mine's just boring in comparison. And what I say is, everyone says that to me. That is pretty well every single person I've spoken to has said the exact same thing. So your story is extraordinary. And that was the whole idea, the whole concept was that seemingly ordinary people have extraordinary stories. And they really do. We've had so many now. We've talked about the difficult subject of eating disorders with Erin, Joey, Karen, and Debbie.
Yeah.
Really powerful stories that resonate with listeners. And I think one of the important things to remember with eating disorders is that it tends to be very isolating.
Yes.
And you know that there are other people who have the same issues you do, but it's something that you don't necessarily feel able to talk about. So when you're hearing that quite intimate conversation in your ear, it might just be the trigger that leads you to get help. And indeed, I've had quite a few personal messages coming to me saying that exact thing. We listened to your podcast with Erin, for example, was a really good one. And I realized I had to do something. Erin's in particular, where she was talking about how she not only wasn't eating properly, but she over-exercised. Yeah. And this woman who wrote to me was listening to the podcast while she was over-exercising at the gym. She was listening to it. She started crying and she said, that was it. That was my moment when I decided I had to do something. So as we were talking about in the interview we've just done, when you realize the really powerful impact that somebody's words can have, it's incredible. And there have been so many good stories. The regular foodies with Taffany Elrod are fantastic. Yeah. I love talking to Taffany.
We love Taffy.
She's always great fun with fantastic recipes.
Yep.
She comes back regularly. We did a Christmas special, Valentine's. We've got a chips and dips coming up.
Nice.
Who doesn't like dips?
Yeah, right.
And of course, we had Austin from Rebel Ice Cream coming on talking about his fabulous ice cream. Dan and Erica in Australia with their food and travel blog. They go around finding great keto places to eat.
Excellent. What a job.
Yeah, exactly. We've had the exercise queens. So Jessica with her dragon boat racing.
Right.
Brooke with her walking and the interesting things she talks about different kinds of movement. Carol, who's a runner, that's coming up next week. Chrissy, who's an Ironman triathlete in her 50s. who, blew me away.
Yeah.
We've had our admins on. Louise, of course, was my first ever.
Yeah.
Kim and Siobhan.
Yeah.
And a couple of really interesting knockout ones that I tend to link to a lot. Carolina, for example, with her incredible story about being told that she could never conceive.
Yeah.
And she had PCOS and all sorts of hormonal issues from the age of 3, I believe. Quite incredible. And ended up spontaneous twins.
Twins!
So, twin boys. So absolutely incredible story.
Yeah.
So it's just been fantastic. We've just had a couple of weeks, a 2-parter with Amber O'Hearn, of course, which was great. Lots of interest in carnivore at the moment.
Yeah.
And I've got some exciting people coming up. I might be interviewing Nina Teicholz, which I'm beyond excited about.
Awesome.
And you lot have been networking for me at Low Carb Breckenridge, so I have a few really exciting celebrity guests coming up.
That's great. It's really cool that there is a show like this just for women, because women have, different experiences with keto than men do. And, that was one of the things that we were told with the 2 keto dudes early on. Hey, dudes, what's with the dudes thing? Where are all the women? And we're like, we're dudes. That's why we called it 2 keto dudes. We interview women, but it takes a podcast for women by women, to really hit home, I think.
Yeah. And it's just great fun. And I love focusing just on them. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to do from the start, was really make the whole show about them. And that's what I do. And it's, for the most part, the difficulty is keeping it down to an hour. I could go on talking to most of them for about 3 hours. They're all so fascinating. I love it. And have become, really good friends with them all as well. Great women.
That's great, Daisy.
And so where can people find the Keto Woman podcast?
So you can find it in all the usual places. Well, you're not allowed to call it iTunes anymore, is it? What is
Apple
it now?
Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Apple Podcasts.
So everybody has a podcast app on their phone, However you get them, just search for Keto Woman.
Yes. Just look for Keto Woman, or you can go to the website and get it via there, which is ketowomanpodcast.com.
And it's woman, not women, right?
Exactly. It's not women, it's Keto Woman. And if you're my next extraordinary woman, then you can get in touch with me at Daisy at ketowomanpodcast.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Daisy. Everything you do, Daisy, is charming, and that is no exception.
Well, we are here to sort of give our thoughts about Low Carb Breckenridge. And first of all, I just got to say, I had a fantastic time. Obviously the talks were the highlight, but the social aspect of it at our party house was amazing too. And I just love cooking for people. But we're going to talk about the talks.
Yeah. So this conference was put on by Jeff Gerber and Rod Taylor, 2 doctors, one in Colorado and one in Melbourne, Australia. And these guys, they just get together and they ski. They ski in Breckenridge or Vail or somewhere around Denver, and they meet up every year. And they decided 3 years ago, why don't we do a conference? Because they're both low carb doctors,
right?
And so they did Low Carb Vail. That was the first conference, and then last year they did Low Carb Breckenridge, and this is the second time they've done Low Carb Breckenridge. So this is the third conference, and it's grown from a dozen people or so to 100 to now 300 people. So they've done really good, and they've put together a really interesting conference.
Yep. They also do the Low Carb Down Under conference, right?
Yeah, that's Rod Taylor in Melbourne, and he does a couple of low carb conferences in Australia. In fact, he's doing one in Perth next weekend, which I'll be going to, which will be good.
Wow.
The interesting thing about Low Carb Brec is that Jeff Gerber puts a lot of effort into making sure that physicians can get CME credits, continuing medical education. And so some 50% of the audience are physicians.
Yep.
And this year, at least 5 of them were cardiologists. So that's remarkable.
It is remarkable.
Yeah. So, anyway, it was a 3-day event, and there was a bunch of really interesting presentations. So the first day was, every presentation just got better and better. So there was Catherine Crofts came on to talk about hyperinsulinemia. Now, she's a New Zealander, and one of the things that First Nations people in New Zealand do is that they have a tribute at the beginning of every sporting event or public event. It's called a karakia. And so she did a karakia in Maori. It's a Maori, in Maori dialect, Maori language. I wrote out the English version of that, which is quite interesting because now you may not know of Catherine Crofts, but she is the person who has the legacy of Dr. Joseph Kraft's data.
Yes.
And she's the one who holds on to that. So her karakia is, in these mountains, let our spirits fly free so that we may learn from our colleagues, so that knowledge is never lost. It does not disappear. It is kept safe. We acknowledge those that have gone before, especially Joseph Kraft. We acknowledge the Sky Father above and the Earth Mother below. Let us be united in purpose and understanding.
Wow.
And I thought that was quite remarkable. I'd never seen anyone do that before. So, she, as I say, she has Dr. Kraft's data. When we were at the Breckenridge conference last year, he passed away on the second day of the conference.
Yeah, I remember.
So it's only a year. It's only been a year since he's been gone, and of course his data is owned by his estate. She doesn't have the rights to share his data.
Right. I liked her story about how she just decided to call or write. Maybe.
Yes,
she wrote and said, I'd like to see about getting your data. And he said, yeah, okay.
Yep, sure.
Hey,
no worries.
No worries.
I've got 350 discs here.
Yeah. And he made a copy and sent it to her. And, and she feels like, wow, can you imagine that? Here's the guy who's got so much data about these people that he did the insulin test on. So she categorized them Kraft categorized them into types, right? Yeah,
into patterns. Yeah, so he could actually determine if somebody had hidden diabetes, or he called it occult diabetes, 10, 15 years before traditional medicine would observe that their glucose is starting to go out of control and they're starting to become diabetic. So he could actually see the beginning of the disease 10 or 15 years beforehand.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that when she got that data, she was able to determine whether somebody was healthy or not from just one data point. See, the Kraft tests, you have to test your insulin every half an hour for 5 hours after taking a glucose bolus. But she was able to determine that if you could look at how much insulin somebody made 2 hours after the glucose, if it's under 30, then there's a 98% chance that you're fine. And if it's over 50, there's a 99% chance that you're unhealthy.
Right. And in that range should sound the alarm if you're in that range. If you're over 30.
Certainly if you're over 50, you need to worry about it. If you're between 30 and 50, she suggests just go low carb and you'll be fine. What she doesn't have the rights to do is share that data. So she's in the process of setting up a trust to look after the data for his family. And one of the things from our point of view as people who are ketogenic dieters, we kind of want to know how well we're doing with this ketogenic diet. Are we reversing our insulin resistance? And so she made the point that a fasting insulin test doesn't tell you a lot, because it's like looking at the speed of an engine when it's up on blocks. What she wants to do is, or she suggests, you really should be looking at the engine when it's under motion. And so fasting insulin really doesn't tell you a lot. But what you can do, she suggested, if you're already diabetic, there's not much point in discovering whether you've got a hidden diabetes. She suggests what we should do is we should do an insulin test 2 hours after having a normal keto meal. And if our insulin has come back to our baseline, then we're becoming healthy. We're becoming more insulin sensitive.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Ivor Cummins was up next, and he was talking, of course, about the calcium score but it was a little bit different this time, wasn't it?
Yeah, he actually looked into certainly into the data of the calcium artery score, but and the reliability of it. But during the Q&A, he said something very interesting, and this was what happens if you have a high calcium score. How can you turn that around? And he suggested that there is some data from William Davis, the guy who wrote Wheat Belly, who published a paper, and he's done a lot of these calcium scores, and he's managed to get some 50% of his people see their score reduced slightly. And Ivor also says anecdotally some people on low carb diets are seeing some regressing of their scores.
Yeah.
And he suggests that if you are able to just slow the progression, that could almost be as beneficial as having a low score.
Yeah.
It's the trend that's not your friend, you know?
And when we interviewed him about this on Two Keto Dudes, a year ago, I think it was, the first time, yeah, that's what he said. He said you want to make sure that it's not getting worse. If it's staying the same, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's when it continues to progress that you really you're really in danger.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ivor was great, and we got a signed copy of his book, him and Gerber's book.
We did indeed, yeah. It's an excellent book. It really is a good one.
Yeah. Yep. The book is called Eat Rich, Live Long, and it's a good combination of science and recipes. Kind of like this.
Yeah. Kind of is.
Dave Feldman. What can we say about Dave other than the guy's a genius?
The guy is a genius.
The Galileo of lipids.
Yeah. He's come up with a brand new analogy, which is how a nation distributes food after a flood crisis, and with the vehicles that are distributing the food being the lipoproteins, and the food being triglycerides, and cholesterol being first aid kits that are set out as support on the vehicles. And he made a good case that remnant cholesterol appears to be a marker for cardiovascular disease that is better than LDL lipoproteins or better than triglycerides over HDL. So that was a very interesting talk. But
it was.
Dave goes deep when he goes in.
Yeah, he does. So in remnant cholesterol is if you take your total cholesterol and you subtract both LDL and HDL, whatever's left over, that's remnant cholesterol. And he told this whole story with this allegory of, like you said, the ships distributing food after a flood, after a disaster. And it really just clicked. It clicked for me. It clicked for everybody there. He just did an amazing job.
He certainly did, yeah. One of the next presenters was Stephen Finney. In fact, there was a presenter, Andy Mente, from the Pure Study who spoke about salt, and then Stephen Finney came on to talk about salt. And this is one of the things that he's really championed in the low-carb space, this idea that low-carb flu, that Atkins flu is really hyponatremia, which is a deficiency of sodium.
Right.
Dr. Finney did a great presentation on the first day about beta-hydroxybutyrate being not only just a fuel but also a signaling moiety that can inhibit an enzyme that inhibits our defense against oxidative stress. So basically what that means is that beta-hydroxybutyrate in circulation increases our ability to deal with oxidative stress. It also reduces insulin resistance it signals to a reduction of insulin resistance, and it also decreases the NLRP3 inflammasome, which is a pathway for inflammatory disease. So that first presentation he did was really about all of these advantages of a ketogenic diet for inflammation.
Right.
One of the interesting news points that came out of this is you probably know that Dr. Finney, has had this Finney range of nutritional ketosis. He came up with the idea of nutritional ketosis, so he gets to define the range. And he's always said, 0.5 to 3.0 millimoles per liter of beta-hydroxybutyrate is adequate to be in ketosis. Well, he's actually said, having gone through the study with Sarah Hallberg and the Verta study, that people really, after 6 months, their ketones drop down to 0.4 and they're still adequately in nutritional ketosis. So he sort of flagged that maybe the low end range of ketones may drop a little bit. It won't be zero, because if you have zero ketones, then by definition you're not in ketosis, right?
Sure.
But he certainly, that first presentation was very interesting. What was controversial about low carb Breck was his second presentation.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is when he laid into fasting, and he made a lot of statements about lean tissue loss in fasting, and all of the problems involved with fasting, and a lot of them use data that's in some cases 70, 80 years old, but it's never been challenged. I mean, this data has stood the record. One thing I would mention is that a lot of Dr. Finney's data is lean, healthy young men. Yeah. For example, in the George Cahill study, their subject was 70 kilograms and was quite lean. And so, this is a very different category of person to somebody who has a lot of body fat.
The other thing is that he doesn't really believe in autophagy, does he?
Well, he's actually said that he doesn't believe in it, but that was like 2 months after the Nobel Prize was awarded to a guy for discovering it. So, that he's entitled to his opinion, and he's entitled to make his case, and I respect that, and I certainly respect everything he's done. But I think some of his evidence that he gave was coloured by his perceptions about fasting, and he has said to me that in the 70s there was a diet called the liquid protein diet, which was essentially a protein fast, and it was basically gelatin. You were just eating Jell-O, and the problem is that it was nutritionally inadequate, and people died. But because this diet also puts you into a state of ketosis, ketones got a really bad reputation. And so he says that cruelled his career for 40 years, and he's not young enough to be able to survive that a second time round. Right. So that actually coloured his perceptions there. Yeah.
So after that presentation that he did on sort of the double-edged sword, which was really a single edge for him on fasting, in other words, watch out. You approached him on the microphone in the Q&A session. You asked him what I thought was a pretty good question.
So I asked him, is fasting necessarily calorie restriction? Because a lot of the evidence that he gave, the Fothergill study, for example, which I like to call the Kevin Hall Biggest Loser study, showed that people who calorie restrict, their metabolism goes down. Right. Now, we know that people who fast, their metabolism doesn't plummet like that. So I asked him the question, is a fast necessary caloric restriction? For example, if you have 10 pounds of body fat, then you're able to produce 300 calories a day from that body fat. That's going to be a really rough day, because a man is most men are requiring 1,500 calories a day ish, 15 to 2,000 calories a day, and only getting 300, and you've got no backup. That's going to be a fairly horrible haircut to your metabolic rate. But somebody who has 100 pounds of body fat can produce 3,000 kilocalories per day. And that is a wonderful day. So does a person who has 3,000 calories a day of energy coming in from stored body fat, do they have to use lean protein for energy? And that was my question. Yeah. And he said that the evidence showed that they do.
Yeah, you found it remarkable when Megan Ramos took the stage to talk about her experiences with patients and fasting. One of the things that she said was that her patient profile is not lean, athletic people with little body fat. She would never fast people like that. They're overweight, diabetic, middle-aged people.
And she's fasted 5,000 plus of them successfully and reversed their metabolic syndrome. So, this is one of the things is that Dr. Finney hasn't fasted many people that I'm aware of, and certainly not many that are obese, and certainly not in the numbers that the IDM program has clinically fasted people. So, yeah.
In Dr. Finney's defense, one of the things he did say was a 48-hour fast is safe as far as his data shows. But after that, he thinks that he considers what we think of as autophagy to be, lean, healthy muscle loss. And my next thought was, but after you feed again, your body builds your muscles back. It's not permanent damage. Just like when you exercise, your muscles get torn up. They get damaged. And it's what happens after exercise.
It's actually when you sleep, the day after when you sleep,
right,
that you actually build up your muscles. So I think that autophagy happens all the time. It just goes into acceleration after 3 days.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Finney said that he wouldn't recommend fasting beyond 48 hours.
Right.
But that he suggests that intermittent fasting and time-restricted windows is entirely reasonable in the context of a day. Now, the IDM program rarely fasts people longer than 48 hours anyway. So, that's probably a nuance that was lost on the event. But
I agree.
I think that there is certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence from people who've achieved remarkable success from fasting.
Yeah.
And speaking personally, I would say that fasting was the first time that I recognized that I had total control over my appetite. And so for me, it was an epiphany. For me, it was, okay, I got this. I can do this. I don't have to eat until I'm ready, and I can choose the time and place. And so for me, fasting was it was an eye-opening experience. I generally don't fast more than 3 days, but on the way to low-carb Breckenridge, I fasted for 90 hours, so successfully and happily.
Well, I mean, we're not going to spend this entire episode talking about every single talk, but there are a couple that sort of go together, which is Nina Teicholz and Dr. Michael Eads. And the reason they go together is because they both talked about vegetable oils. They both talked about saturated fats. And Nina, of course, what can we say about her? She's amazing. She's uncovered all this. She reported on all this research that was lost. And it turns out that saturated fat isn't going to kill you.
So this interesting thing about Nina's presentation was basically that she was saying that polyunsaturated fats are easily oxidized. They have these extra double bonds that can take on oxygen or, can become damaged. So the theory that she was delivering was that polyunsaturated fats, or the more unsaturated fat is, the more potential it has for being damaged. And whereas a saturated fat is pretty much at its ground state, it's not going to become much more damaged from where it is without a lot of heat. So what I found interesting about Michael Eads' presentation, and I consider this to be the highlight of my experience at Low Carb Breckenridge, and that is that he was able to identify exactly how good or how bad a fatty acid is. And he explained it thusly. He explained that our cells, when they metabolize fats or any substrate of energy, if they get too much energy, they have a backup mechanism called the reverse electron transport chain, which is able to signal the rest of the cell to say, we're getting too much energy too quickly, we need to slow this whole thing down.
Yeah.
And so basically, what it does is it makes the cell temporarily, locally insulin resistant. And we've always gotten used to insulin resistance being a bad thing, but Dr. Eads explained that insulin resistance in this local context was a great thing for the cell because it gives a cell the ability to regulate how much energy is coming in.
Yeah, it says, nope, can't take any more. You're going to have to do something else with that energy, and it doesn't overstuff the cell. And saturated fat actually does that. It causes that reverse electron transport chain.
What happens is as you break down through beta oxidation, as you break down a fatty acid, you are going to be creating two different signaling molecules. They're part of the redox state of the cell. You're going to be creating FADH2 and you're going to be creating NADHs. And the number that you make is dependent on the fat that you put into the process. So, for example, if you put in a saturated fat like palmitic, which is this is actually the fat that we make when we have too much energy and we need to start making fat. This is the fat that we make, palmitic acid. And you make 15 FADH2s and 31 NADHs. And that gives you an FADH2 to an NADH ratio, or an FN ratio, of 0.48. Now, he was able to show that more in that ratio is better. Below 0.46, you're not getting any of this reverse electron transport chain activity. And one of the things that does is it promotes mitogenesis. So we talk a lot about turning white adipose tissue into beige and then brown adipose tissue.
Yeah.
This is the process of making lots and lots more mitochondria. And this is why the color changes of the fat cells, because when they just have a very few mitochondria, they're white. But as you get more and more mitochondria, they become darker brown and then fully brown. So, so this is the process of mitogenesis, and it's the cell responding, saying we've got so much fuel and I can't turn it into energy fast enough, so we need more mitochondria. And this is actually a very healthy process.
It's a good thing. Yeah,
it is.
More mitochondria means more energy.
That's right.
More fat burned.
More ability to deal with fuel. So,
right.
So palmitic acid, this is a saturated fat, is 0.48, where you really want to be 0.46 or greater. The monounsaturated version of the exact same fatty acid, so this is an 18 carbon chain monounsaturated fat. This is called palmitoleic. So palmitic is the saturated, palmitoleic is the monounsaturated fat, and it has an FN ratio of 14/31, which is 0.45. So this is not as good, and it won't have this reverse electron transport chain activity. As another example is oleic, which is the monounsaturated fatty acid that's common in olive oil. It has an FADH2 production of 16 and an NADH production of 35, which gives you 0.46. So oleic, monounsaturated fat in olive oil, it's okay. It'll produce some, but not nearly as much as the longer chain saturated fatty acids. And the polyunsaturated version of that exact same fatty acid, which is called linoleic, produces 15 FADH2s and 35 NADHs, which gives you a ratio of 0.43. So it's well below the level. Yeah.
The TLDR, too long, don't read version, is that we have a way to quantify good fats versus bad fats. And saturated fats are the king.
Objectively.
Yeah, with numbers.
Yeah.
And saturated fats are the king, and then monounsaturated, and then polyunsaturated.
Which I guess is what Nina said all along.
Right. But he actually showed the biochemistry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He showed how it happens inside our cells. Nina was just saying, that these polyunsaturated fats can become more corrupted, more, broken apart easily. And she's right. But, at the cellular level, Dr. Eads was able to show how you really don't want to be running on polyunsaturated fats for energy.
Right. So his last slide said, eat more saturated fat. It's actually protective, and he showed it, just like you described it. And avoid linoleic acid like the plague.
Right. So where is linoleic acid?
Yeah, so we went and looked it up. There's a place that I found it on the web, and you also looked it up in the NDB.NAL-USDA.gov website database.
That's a nutrient database, yep.
Yep, nutrient database. So starting from the most percentage of linoleic acid, evening primrose oil. I don't know anybody who eats that. Is that like a... Is that a I thought that was what you put on your skin or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like a topical remedy.
74%.
Sunflower oil is 71%. I've heard of people eating that.
Yeah. Corn oil is 59.27%.
Yeah, I try not to eat any of that.
Yeah.
And cottonseed oil is 56%. And interestingly enough, that was one of the first seed oils. And it was used at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We used to use whale oil, and cottonseed was found to replace whale oil when killing whales became unpopular.
Yeah. Soybean oil, which is in all commercial mayonnaise.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty much makes up all of the deep fried oil that when you get French fries anywhere, anywhere, it's going to be soybean oil. That's why America makes so many soybeans. We grow soybeans for the oil. 56%. Not good.
Wow. So skipping down, we've got peanut oil, which we use a lot for frying. That's 31%.
Right. And again, the reason that I'm using peanut oil for deep frying is because I've been told, and I need to, somebody please correct me on this because I really want to know. I've been told that because it has such a high smoke point that, yes, it has linoleic acid in it and it has, the PUFAs, but less of it sticks to the food. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been told.
Well, I know that I use lard and tallow, and lard actually has 10% linoleic acid and tallow has 3%. So maybe I might be switching more to tallow.
Yeah, right. Extra virgin olive oil has 8.6%. Olive oil has 7%. You found cocoa butter to be really low.
Yeah, 2.8% cocoa butter, and stearic acid is the predominant fatty acid in cocoa butter. So if you're making low carb or zero carb chocolates, there's almost no linoleic acid in them.
Almost none. Palm kernel oil, 2.76%. I've never used palm kernel oil, but I'm sure I've consumed it.
No doubt. My favorite too, butter at 1.8 and coconut oil at 1.6.
Oh yeah,
almost
butter and
no
coconut oil.
linoleic acid, yeah.
Healthy fats.
Yeah. So that was a summary from Dr. Reed's presentation, and I find the man fascinating. He can just come up with an interesting way of looking at things that just totally changes your perspective.
Yep. It was great. There's so many other people that we didn't mention. Ben Beichman had a good presentation. So many other people. So I think these videos will probably be online at some point on YouTube. Yeah. So wait for that. And when we find out that they're public, we'll tell you.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. And that brings us to
recipes. So without using so much linoleic acid, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go first today. And this recipe is in the vein of the dim sum meals that I've been creating recently, but this is a Vietnamese recipe. And you often find this in a dim sum course. In Vietnamese, it's called chow tom, which is grilled shrimp on sugarcane.
Ooh.
And now I'm not going to use sugarcane here. I'm going to tweak this recipe a little. I'm getting this recipe from Viet World Kitchen, and this is a traditional Vietnamese appetizer. And what you do, it's essentially a shrimp paste wrapped around a piece of sugarcane, but we're not going to use sugarcane, of course. No. There are two options that we can use, and I've tried lemongrass, which works really well because that sort of limonene flavor of lemongrass is really nice with shrimp. And the other thing you can do is you can go the other direction to fennel fronds, and fennel gives you that sort of aniseed sort of flavor to it. So both excellent options to use other than sugarcane.
Very good.
So this recipe, you're going to take a pound of medium shrimp. You're going to peel it and devein it. It ends up being about 13 ounces net weight of flesh. We're going to use some salt. Now, the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. I'm not going to use cornstarch. Instead, I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of Chinese cooking sherry, shaoxing. And what we're going to do is we're going to stir the shaoxing into the protein, and what that will do is it'll cause the protein to gel a little bit. So it sets the protein. It's just as good as cornstarch. So we have our pound of medium shrimp, 13 ounces of net weight, a little bit of salt. We're going to have our 2 teaspoons of shaoxing. We're going to have we're going to have some sweetener if you need sweetener. I find that these recipes that use sugar don't need sweeteners because my palate has sort of gotten used to not having sugar. But if you must put a little bit of Splenda or sucralose or xylitol or something in the recipe. We're going to have some fish sauce, and fish sauce is necessary for that flavour, for the flavour for shrimp. We're going to have 2 cloves of garlic, minced and crushed into a paste, a large egg lightly beaten, 2 tablespoons of minced shallots, a tablespoon of minced pork fat bat. Now, what I use is, I just use lard, so it works just as well. Yeah. And we're going to form. Basically, what we do is we're going to coarsely chop the shrimp and put them in a blender, and then we're going to add all of the ingredients, and so there's the salt, the Shaoxing wine, the fish sauce, the eggs, garlic, and shallots, and we're going to transfer in the food processor. We're going to blitz it until we get a coarse paste. Nice. And then we're going to transfer that to a bowl and stir in the lard, and we cover it with a plastic wrap and set it aside for 15 to 30 minutes. Now, I'm going to diverge briefly from this recipe after this process. We've got the wine, the cooking sherry has been mixed well with the proteins. What we're then going to do is we're going to stir the mixture until it starts to get thick. And then we're going to wrap it around our sticks of either lemongrass or fennel. I mean, you can use sugarcane if you want, but, I wouldn't. So now what you do is you're going to steam it and use a Chinese wok steaming gadget. We're going to put it in a bamboo steamer. We're going to put a piece of a lettuce leaf on the base of the steamer, or we can use some parchment paper as well, oiled parchment paper.
They would use banana leaves sometimes.
Use banana leaves, yeah. The idea is to steam these into shape and then either grill them or deep fry them. And if you're going to deep fry them in tallow, as we found. Yeah, be careful because it's going to have some water in it. So.
Right. You might want to dry it off a little first.
Yeah. So that's the recipe. Now, how you eat these things is you basically have a small bowl with mayonnaise in, and you dip the prawn meat wrapped around the stick into the mayonnaise, and you nom nom nom.
Nom nom nom. Recipe. Awesome. Well, I'm going to give my recipe for just simple, fabulous shrimp.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. I mean, it's just sautéed shrimp, but this is what I do when I sauté shrimp. I start with a pound of shrimp, just like you, and butter to satiety, whatever that means for you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking at least a few tablespoons of butter in the pan. I use a cast iron pan. You can use whatever you like, of course. For garlic, I'm going to chop up or crush maybe 4 cloves of garlic. So garlic is predominant in here.
Yeah, it's a garlic forward flavor.
Absolutely. Also, lemon juice and white wine. Lemon juice you don't need much of, but it gives that piquant kind of flavor with shrimp. It goes really well with shrimp. And if you haven't noticed, I've been on a lemon zest kick lately. That's where the oil is. That's where the flavor is.
I've noticed.
So anytime I'm using lemon juice, I'm also zesting the lemon, put some in there. And the juice of half a lemon is probably adequate. I'm going to add some white wine to this. Now, notice I haven't put the shrimp in yet. I've just got the butter, the garlic, the lemon juice, the white wine, and, maybe half a cup of white wine. And you can salt and pepper to taste. And some people also put in a little hot chili, some chili paste.
Sure.
And there's all sorts of different kinds of chili paste out there. Just make sure that it doesn't have any sugar. But that's optional. And, when we're talking about small plates, we're talking about tapas. This is actually pretty close to just a firecracker shrimp tapas. Nice. So the whole idea is you want to heat that stuff up. And once it's heated up, then you put your shrimp in and you cook them in this sauce. And it doesn't take long, right? We're just talking a couple of minutes per side over medium heat.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you just flip them over, you want to put them, you don't want to just put them in and stir and stir and stir, because then you really don't have control over how much every shrimp gets cooked. Yeah. Put them down flat. By the time you've laid them all out, it's probably time to flip over the first one you put down.
Yeah. Do you watch the progression of the opaqueness go through the flesh? So when it hits the middle and turn them over? Yeah.
Absolutely. If you can do that, great. If not, just use the 2-minute rule. Yeah. And then you take these off and you have a lovely sauce, right? So put the shrimp on a plate. Mm-hmm. You can continue to cook down that sauce if you want to, but you don't really need to. You put that sauce on the side, and then for a garnish, a little flat leaf parsley chopped up.
Nice. And
sprinkle that over. And, if you want a small plate, you serve them 1 shrimp at a time, or maybe 3.
Yep.
Or you could just put them in a big bowl and have at it.
Outstanding.
Yeah, simple, fabulous shrimp.
That's a very shrimp-forward episode.
Yep, excellent. Shrimp it is.
Of course, if you have anything you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something you don't agree with, some more research that you found to support or refute anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter at 2ketodudes, on Instagram at 2ketodudes, and make sure to use the hashtag 2ketodudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com.
And if useless swag is your fancy t-shirts, coffee mugs, and all that other junk, head over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts that we produce, including 2 Keto Dudes, Keto Woman with Daisy Brackenhall, and the Obesity Code podcast with Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
Or just hit the donate button on our website at www.2ketodudes.com, or just go to donate.2keto.com.
And you can also see our podcasts and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com.
And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to find out about what we do.
2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications. Well, keep calm and keto on, Richard.
Put another shrimp on the barbie, Carl.
All right, we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.